Have you ever wondered why throughout Scripture you see God repeat himself so much? He is constantly telling his people to remember, repeat, meditate, teach, practice, return to him. Sometimes I think that repetition feels unnecessary. We want instant breakthrough. We want immediate healing. We want perfect transformation. But real healing is usually much slower than that. It's usually repeated prayers, repeated truths, repeated choices, repeated surrender, repeated reminder. And I think that a lot of people get discouraged because we're thinking, why am I still working on this? Why do I still need these reminders? Shouldn't I have moved on from this by now? Shouldn't I have been able to get over it?
Yeah, and that repetition is not evidence that healing is not working.
Yeah, it's actually the way that healing works.
Correct.
Yeah. Welcome to Hope Through the Hard, a curated coalition podcast where we talk honestly about life struggles and how to face them in healthy, hope-filled ways. In 2 Corinthians 4, Paul says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." That's the purpose of this space. Real conversations about the hard things in life and the hope that carries us through. Visit curatedcoalition.com to find our coaching services and book a free consultation.
Hi, I'm Levi. This is Ashley, and we have Lincoln running production today. Kid question?
Yep. Okay, so what is your favorite board game?
Oh, Catan.
Yeah, Catan.
Yeah.
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 And yours?
Poker.
That's not a board game.
Not
That's
a
a card
board.
game. It's Catan.
Clue.
Blue. Interesting.
Okay.
You know what
Clue.
the number one board game sold every year is?
Catan. Clue.
Chess. Number 2 is checkers.
It's because you can buy them in a 2-pack.
Yeah.
Just what I heard.
You didn't answer.
You didn't
Said
answer.
Catan.
Oh, you did?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because he likes to beat me. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
lost the last dozen matches.
Because you let me win.
Not just Adeline won the last one.
Because you let us win. Or you weren't playing that. Were you playing in that one?
Yeah, he was playing.
There's like 6 of us in
Oh,
a small
yeah.
board.
Yeah, she did.
It's tight.
But you let us win. That's not fair.
I gave her about 12 cards at the end of the game.
That's because we were teamed up against the boys.
Yep.
For no reason.
Because you guys were naughty. Catan is my favorite. And you absolutely hate it, Lincoln.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, good question. I like that
you.
question. That's a fun one. So I think that we're focusing this week on obviously repetition and why repetition matters, especially in healing. And one of the most influential breakthrough discoveries in neuroscience has been that of neuroplasticity, which we've talked about multiple times. Neuroplasticity is just the brain's ability to reorganize itself by building new neural pathways through repeated experiences, repeated thoughts, repeated behaviors, repeated emotions. So in very simple terms, when we repeatedly practice something, it becomes easier for the brain to access that new thing. So the brain adapts to repetition. And so we also, because I love the statistics, I looked up what are some statistics that kind of help to illustrate this. And Harvard Health and the NIH show that repeated thoughts and behaviors strengthen neural pathways over time, influencing emotional regulation, habits, perception, and long-term behavior patterns. So neuroplasticity remains possible throughout your whole life. So as long as you're alive, you are able to build new neural pathways, which I think is really important. And so I think that the thing to remember is that anything that you repeat will build a pathway. So repeated fear builds a fear pathway, but repeated truth builds safety, regulation, and creates new patterns. So as you are repeating truth, you are building new truth pathways. So this is where healing becomes really hopeful, I think, for people. It can still be discouraging because you do have to repeat it. But the more you repeat it, the more you see those neural pathways strengthening and becoming stronger. So trauma survivors, I think, and remember, trauma doesn't have to be a big event.
Nope.
It can be anything. But they just, after a trauma, you assume that this is who I am. I will always react this way, or this is just something that I can never change. But the brain isn't fixed. It adapts and it changes.
Yeah.
So, question for you. Have you ever noticed that people become discouraged when healing isn't instant?
People or myself?
Yeah, or me.
Yes, I think it's a huge thing. I know I get frustrated with myself because it's not a quick thing, that this is a slow growth that changes. I know you get frustrated with me because I didn't just change immediately, and my patterns all of a sudden aren't changing, and there's a lot of frustration that goes back and forth. And how do you keep going from this? Keep moving, keep trying, and wanting immediate freedom is great from your trauma and everything. Part of that's just you repeating those things over and over. And I've seen it over and over of it takes time. And it's not just a simple, oh, I'm healed. Oh, I'm good now. My brain's all wired back correctly in the way it's supposed to be. No, it takes habit and takes time, and it's going to be discouraging. You're going to struggle through the healing process of all this. And I know I struggle a lot breaking my habits of, years and years of acting a set way. And sometimes it's my survival mode. And I've seen that in others as well.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's particularly frustrating too. I feel like a lot of times I'm just constantly taking the same old things back to God. And it's like, why can I not get past this? Yeah, and I do get frustrated with you because it's like, why are we still in the same pattern? Like, come on, let's go. But here we are.
Because I'm
still
just
practicing.
To change right away.
Yeah.
And there are some situations that do change right away. There are some things, and sometimes you're going to have bad days, and things are going to kick back, and you're going to be triggered, and you're going to resort back to the old situations and old habits. And we have to realize and understand, hey, I messed up. I need to get back on path.
Yeah. I think the thing that is important to remember is that trauma is repetitive. So your nervous system is shaped by criticism, chaos, fear, rejection, unpredictability, shame. So all of those things can happen, when you're young. Like you can be in, if one side of your family is a bit unpredictable, you will build a response pattern based on that unpredictability that then becomes just an immediate response for you. Or if someone is overly critical of you, that will build a response pattern that doesn't then just affect that person, but transfers to all different parts of your life and all different people as you grow and mature. And so trauma is not just, like a big, huge, horrible incident that's happened to you. It can be anything that your nervous system triggers as one of those things: criticism, chaos, fear, unpredictability. Your nervous system will interpret that the same way that trauma is interpreted. And so we then practice those survival responses unwittingly, unknowingly over time. And so your body learns and it tells itself, this is how you survive. You survive by getting away. You survive by getting angry. Whatever your trigger response is, your body learns that's how you survive. And so people feel stuck then in maybe hypervigilance, people pleasing, panic, shutdown, self-criticism, and shame. And it's not because you're weak.
No, not at all.
It's because the pathways were reinforced repeatedly and you didn't know how to fix them.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is huge spiritually as well, that healing isn't just a spiritual insight into what's going on, it's practicing something different in the long run for our brain and our body to learn safety. And then whenever we have, I think, that safety, then the spiritual part, we start to feel unsafe possibly as well with God. Depending on what your trauma is, I think this is something that's key of why some people have a hard time really connecting with God, as we talked about in the past episodes of resting and prayer and listening to God. I think this is another part of just kind of laying out some more of, here's the situation of this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like when they can't then connect with God, that it's because they're broken and that they've done something wrong. And your body's trying to protect you. It's not that you're broken. And healing often involves repetition. Here's the kick, that it has to be strong enough to compete with the thing that you have taught yourself, that old pattern that you've created through, the immediate response that you didn't even know you could change. And so until the repetition is strong enough to compete with the intensity of your old conditioning, you're probably going to continue to struggle.
Yeah, and it's not simple. It's not easy. One, like we've talked about in some of the situations, we have to name it. I have to recognize those situations, and then I have to say, oh, wait, here, I'm walking into this. Maybe I shouldn't be talking. I need to stop and pause and think and process, what do I need to do and how do I need to change it? Recognize that first of, I'm in this bad pattern again.
Yeah. Yeah. So Deuteronomy 6 and 7, which we have read multiple times on this show, is the words that I command you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. And so God is, and that was something that was imprinted and posted on their doorway, right? They saw that every time they left their house. And so God was instructing his people to repeat truth, remember his ways, remember his works, recite scripture, practice rhythm, constantly, like he built feasts into their calendar. So repeat the feasts, keep the Sabbath, tell stories. Why? Because that repetition formed his people. Right. And that was how he knew that if you hear these things and read these things and say these things, eventually you will be building new neural pathways and you will be forming the kind of person that I need my nation to be. This is how I want my children to be. These are the things you need to teach your children, and you need to hear them and say them enough so put them on your door. And every time you leave this place, think about that and tell your children, which is huge. And honestly, if you've ever looked at like a Sabbath practice, it's very repetitive. Right. They did the same thing. They read the same scriptures. They prayed the prayers every Friday. And so it was a repeated practice. Yeah.
And you might think that these situations are very childish because that we're doing for the kids, but God's made us and created us this way that even us adults have these habits that we need to create as well. And biblically it's stating these are how you're supposed to live repetitively. God's continually telling us over and over these different things to humble us, to be able to see he's created us for a specific reason, and humans are shaped for repeating. And I think a great verse to memorize and pray as well is Romans 12:2. Do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So our mind constantly being transformed and not just scrolling. I think we transform our mind so much into the world with what we see in our devices that we need God to transform our mind away from this worldly way of seeing things all the time and be able to focus more on Him and just help us have a different habit, have a different view of what is going on with the growth of ourselves, the growth of others around us, whether that's forgiveness, grace, or just being a brother or sister in love, helping them out.
Yeah.
I think it's huge.
Yeah. Well, and I think that when you read that verse, do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Right. Renewal implies a process. Yep. that just the picture, like when you think about something being renewed, you think like it's cyclical. It's a process. It's not perfection, but it's a process.
Correct.
And so, was there ever a season when you needed those repeated reminders of truth because your emotions weren't catching up?
Yeah, I think
Every time I ask you a question, you laugh at me. I don't know how to feel about that.
because there's so much that's involved in it. It's not a simple answer of some of these situations, because like one area is anxiety. And whenever we get into different seasons of our roller coaster rides of life, and we get into that low and we have anxiety in that season, it's like, oh, I'm stuck. And so I think this is a time, especially trying to not be discouraged and work through those things, is to say, okay, God's got me. He's going to help me. Change is going to happen. I just have to keep the habits and keep working. Keep pushing through it, because if not, eventually you're going to run into burnout, and then it's harder to get out as well after you ran yourself ragged to the point of there is no hope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think burnout happens a lot faster than people think it does. Which you only have so much capacity, and when your capacity is out, you're burned out. And when you're burning the candle from both ends for, 5 years, you've reached burnout and you don't know it.
Right.
But the people around you probably do. And they probably are trying to tell you, but
Right.
it sometimes,
Hopefully.
yeah, well, but a lot of times you have to hear that more than once from more than one person, because again, the repetition has to happen.
Right.
So I think that one reason that healing can feel discouraging is because people confuse or conflate repetition with regression. So like you feel like, oh, I'm having to do this again, so I've regressed. I'm moving backwards instead of forwards. You think I'm still struggling with this same thought pattern, with shame, with burnout, or with anxiety, or whatever. Or you're frustrated that you still need someone to remind you, like, it's okay for you to rest.
Right.
It's okay for you to do this. Or I think maybe you're responding out of a trigger. Or you're frustrated because you still have to take off your shoes and go outside and practice breath work and grounding. Or because the same scripture is still the only thing that is speaking to you. Like, if you've been in a burnout stage and the only thing that is speaking to you is a psalm, and it's just the one, then that can feel really frustrating, to feel like, you're so disconnected from God. But I think it's important to remember that just because you're stuck in that repetition doesn't mean that you're failing.
Right.
I think it's good to remember that an athlete practices. Mm-hmm. They repeat the same drills, the same practice, the same things over and over. A musician will repeat the same song over and over and over before they ever get on stage to sing it or to perform it.
Yep.
How many times have you, if you're a parent, this will sound familiar, you've walked by your child's room, especially when they're little, and you hear them practicing something over and over before they come out to show you or to tell you what they've learned. Maybe it's a new skill and they're practicing it. If you have a camera in their room like a crib monitor, you might see them practicing pulling up on their own before they perform that for you, before they're ready to perform that for you, because our brain changes with repetition. Mm-hmm. So spiritually, discipleship is also repetition.
Yeah. Well, and Jesus showed us a lot of ways of doing this, and showing us rhythms. And once we get into our rhythms of it, life's a lot smoother, hopefully, depending on the rhythms of what you built and the habits you've created. So Jesus prayed a lot. He withdrew to separate so he could take some quiet time with God. The Sabbath, taking that day of rest, and then making sure we're listening into teaching of the scriptures and sermons, but also in church of communion with the Father. And I think these are some habits that we can sometimes get out of. And these are ways that God's continually showed us over and over in Scripture of what to do spiritually to get you out of these habits as well.
Yeah, and studies on habit formation show that repeated intentional practice strengthens our automatic behavioral patterns over time. So when you practice something, it becomes automatic. And that eventually reduces the cognitive effort and your emotional stability.
Yeah.
So as you practice it, it becomes easier. So then you're more comfortable with it. And so I think that's an important thing for us to just think about. It feels frustrating. And I'm sure that, just like we were talking about athletes and musicians, anyone who does something professionally, they repeat that over and over and over and over again, and you become better at it. The same is true here.
Yeah, and with that, don't think that, well, now I've become mature enough and I've overcome all these things and I've healed, I don't need the repetition. Not so much true. Part of maturity is knowing and understanding that we kind of need repetition to happen in all the seasons and finding new ways to improve ourselves. So you're going from one habit of practicing to something else to better yourself even more.
Yeah, I think that's great. Repetition is where healing finds its own body, its own pattern, its own place to stand in your life. And so the nervous system doesn't usually heal through intensity. And I think that's very true. It's usually just through consistent, predictable gentleness, where you repeat things that make you feel safe. That's where we can find that nervous system turn off of fight or flight, your amygdala turn off, and you can kind of just take a breath. Small repeated patterns matter. They matter a lot, not because they're not dramatic,
Right.
but they are going to teach your body that you can be safe. You can turn off that amygdala and just take a breath, and you're not running from anything. You're not fighting anything. You don't have to please anyone.
Right.
You can thaw, not be in that freeze state. Whatever it is for you, that's important.
Yeah. Well, and some practices to help you with some of these, as we've talked about, breathing techniques. Somatic is a huge way of doing that, but going outside and walking outdoors, and finding ways to get grounded. Worship music and listen to that. Safe relationships, I think, is huge, where you could have a relationship with somebody to be able to come with, hey, here's some of my frustrations. Here's some of these situations. I keep running into these same bad habits, and I need to talk through this. Whether that's a friend or life coaching. Exercise can help with this as well, because then you're exerting energy out of your body. And then speaking the truth out loud, I think, is huge. Just to say, here's how I messed up. Here's my habit, and naming that and saying it out loud. So then, hey, I'm not just holding this inside, processing it. I'm saying it out loud, and maybe it's through a loud prayer to God as well.
Yeah. And I think, don't be frustrated if you don't like, like strenuous exercise.
Right.
That's okay. I have very recently, I tried for a while lifting weights and to get, energy out, and he's laughing because it wasn't good for me. It raised my cortisol. It stressed me out. I hated it. And I'm right back to yoga. I want nothing to do with those silly little dumbbells anymore. But I think that it's good to trust your gut. Whatever makes you feel better is what you need to practice. If something is stressing you out, even if it's the exercise, if someone's pressuring you into it, it's okay for you to say, I think I'm going to practice something else. Just because that's good for you doesn't mean it's good for me, and that's okay. Because I was feeling very pressured to this is how I'm going to lose weight, and this is how I'm going to be strong, and these are the things that are good for me. But it wasn't giving me the benefits that I needed. And so even the things that are supposed to be, what's the word? stress relief. If it's not relieving stress, if it's
Right.
creating
Creating
stress,
stress.
then let it go.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yes, give yourself the grace to let that go, to stop that.
Yeah.
Hey, this isn't helping me.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace to say, oh, it's okay to stop. It's okay to try something different and different seasons. Hey, this isn't helping me anymore. I'm not feeling the same benefits from last time or the past times of doing this. Maybe it's time to trying yoga, where you're just calming yourself down and stretching and taking some time to just calm.
Yeah.
So give yourself some grace to try different things in the seasons that you're in.
Yeah, and in each one on their own might feel small, but those repeated small things create long-term change. And so, yeah, I immediately like it transitioning back to yoga felt small, but it's so much more calming for me. And so that was a little change that I very recently made, and it's like I needed to let that go.
Yes, you did.
So what are some small repeated practices that have changed you over time? Maybe spiritually, maybe emotionally, maybe one of each. I don't know, whatever you're thinking.
One of the big things for me trying to help is slow to speak. I've learned this a long time ago, but then, especially getting triggered, I want to respond quickly to people please, or I get angry and trigger. And so it's a continual, hey, slow down. Something was said to me, doesn't mean I have to respond right away. Breathe through that for a second. I think is huge in helping with learning our emotional honesty, being truthful about ourselves. Really dig into that inner child and in our heart of how do I really feel? How am I processing through these situations whenever these things happen of these bad habits causing a reaction from somebody else? What am I doing? How am I feeling about this situation? Because that feeling can actually draw up some more, hey, yes, you do need to change. And here's the process of going through that. Another rhythm of repeating is figuring out your constant Sabbath, I think, rhythm is a huge thing to do, is learning to take that time to rest and build a habit of repetitiveness of that.
Yeah, that's hard for me. So, yeah. So we've kind of built something into the last few episodes that I think is good. What does this look like before you started healing? What does this look like during healing? And how does this look after you've done some healing work? So before healing, people often think that, we live in an instant gratification society, that they're going to see instant transformation. They're ashamed of the fact that they have to repeat something. They then quit whatever that thing is before it's even had a chance to work. And they believe that real faith should feel effortless. So their nervous system remains activated, like on all the time, and they are totally overwhelmed.
Yeah. And during the healing part, repeating healthier responses, returning to truth intentionally of here's how I feel, here's what's really should be going on, taking place is going to be showing up in the healing phase. And then we're able to practice some regular rhythms and repeat some of these new habits, and also interrupting that shame pattern that maybe we've really been attached to and holding on to and won't let go. But this stage is also exhausting because new pathways still feel unfamiliar and takes a lot of time to transition some of that. And this feels weird.
Yeah.
And I struggle with this this kind of feels weird. And I'm not for sure if I said the right thing the right way. But I got to try something. I got to do something different.
Yeah. After healing, I think that those repeated patterns tend to become more natural, more embodied. You practice them more fully every time you do them. They're less forced and they're much more accessible. And so they're not perfect because, we are never going to have it down perfectly, but they are much more integrated into our daily lives and our daily patterns. So healing becomes much less about emergency survival where your amygdala is turned on and you're just doing things without even thinking about what you're doing. You've built in that space to pause and respond carefully. And so it's much more about steady formation.
Yep.
Yeah. So every day your brain is being shaped by repetition, and you kind of hit on this earlier. The question is not, am I being formed, but what's forming me? And so we get a lot of repeated inputs that I don't think we think about. And you brought up like scrolling, like the constant scrolling. We are being formed by those things. And so what we see matters. So our repeated inputs matter. If it's fear-based, I was just talking to the neighbor the other day. They went on vacation and she was like, "I didn't watch the news the whole time." And they're a little bit older than us. And so they still are very, they still very much like watch the nightly news. And she's like, I feel better without it. And I'm like, I bet you do. Yes. And so, that repeated input matters. If it's fear, if it's the news, if it's whatever is on social media, if it's constant criticism or shame, that matters.
Yeah.
But it also matters if it's truth, if it's scripture, if it's peace, if it's joy, if it's community, if it's worship, if it's happiness, if it's family. That's also an input. And so you can choose which input you want. And that's important.
Yeah.
You can choose that.
Yeah, because what we repeatedly consume eventually influences what we feel is true.
Yeah. So Philippians 4:8 is, I think, a good verse for that. It says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, anything worthy of praise, think about these things." So Paul understood something that neuroscience now in the year 2026 confirms, and that's that our attention shapes formation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if healing feels repetitive right now, that doesn't mean you are failing. And so I think we have to continue to see, here's these situations, pour this stuff in. The brain changes through repetition. The nervous system learns through repetition. Discipleship happens through repetition. And God is repeating himself over and over in Scripture because he understands how he made us and how we can heal from the trauma that's happened in our lives. And we're not weak because we have to have constant reminders. You are human. You're going to mess up. And as God gives us grace, give yourself some grace as well, because this is a slow growth process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes transformation, I think, looks much less like a lightning bolt and much more like repeated, consistent truth that is enough for your soul to finally begin to believe it.
Yeah. So some reflecting questions to kind of ask yourself: what truths do I repeat to myself most often? Mm-hmm. I think this is huge. And write these down and maybe put it up on a mirror. What patterns has my nervous system learned through repetition? And whether you realize it or not, what's some of the things that you're actually repeating and that you've learned? Where have I confused repetition with failure? Mm-hmm. I think is a great question to kind of reflect on.
Yeah. So let us know how you're doing with repetition. It can feel frustrating, and we know that. But let us know if you saw some breakthrough in this. Please pass this episode to someone else who you think might benefit from it. Like, subscribe, share if we can help walk you through any of this, because we do know it can feel frustrating. You can find our coaching services at curatedcoalition.com. Thanks for joining us for today's conversation. My hope is that you leave here reminded that whatever you're facing, you're not crushed, abandoned, or destroyed. That's the promise of 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9, and the heartbeat of hope through the hard. Visit curatedcoalition.com for all of our coaching services or to book your free consultation. We'll see you next time.